Have you ever felt like you were missing something in life? Some crucial piece that would make the emptiness inside you less hollow? I've spent the last 8 months feeling exactly that way. 8 months since Jessica died in that head-on collision on Route 29. 8 months of waking up every morning, wishing I could trade places with her. Grief does things to a person. It changes you, twists you into someone you no longer recognize when you look in the mirror. It makes you do things you'd never considered before, like breaking into an abandoned mall because of some stupid urban legend. The Westridge Galleria has been sitting empty on the east side of Cartersville since 2016. Once the crown jewel of North Georgia retail, it's now just a decaying monument to capitalism with a massive future site of luxury condos banner that's been flapping in the wind for 3 years. The same banner, the same coming soon promise, now sun-bleached and tattered. Nothing ever comes. Jessica would have loved exploring it, my beautiful, adventurous fiancé, who saw wonder in the forgotten places of the world. We'd been together since sophomore year at Emerson High, inseparable for 9 years, until a drunk driver named Marcus Devereaux swerved into her lane one rainy Tuesday evening. He walked away with a broken arm. She never walked again. I probably wouldn't have even heard about the mall game if it weren't for Dominic Reeves texting me out of the blue last week. Dom and I had been close in college but drifted apart after graduation. He's one of those friends who only reaches out when he wants something, but his message caught my attention. Ethan, weird question. Have you heard about that ritual at Westridge? The one where you can supposedly talk to the dead? Taylor Nichols claims she did it and spoke to her grandfather. I ignored him at first. I've never been much for supernatural bullshit. But that night, I found myself on Reddit, scrolling through obscure forums where people swore they'd played the Westridge game and received messages from departed loved ones. Most seemed like typical internet crap, but one post stood out. Detailed instructions, written by someone calling themselves Mallwalker1988, who claimed they'd successfully completed the ritual and spoken with their dead mother. The post had been deleted, but someone had screenshotted it. The rules were very specific. Rule 1. Enter the Westridge Galleria through the service entrance behind the old Drummond's department store, exactly at 11:38 p.m. on a Tuesday. Rule 2. Bring a flashlight, but use it only when absolutely necessary. Rule 3. If you hear the sound of the DeMarco's Italian fountain running, cover your ears and close your eyes until it stops. Rule 4. Do not enter Kitty Kingdom or Claire's accessories under any circumstances. Rule 5. Never run, even if you hear footsteps behind you. Running attracts them. Rule 6. If you see a mannequin where there wasn't one before, walk backward slowly until you can't see it anymore. Rule 7. When you reach the timepiece, jewelers on the 3rd floor, place a personal item of the deceased on the counter and wait until exactly 3:33 a.m. It sounded like garbage, the kind of manufactured creepypasta that bored teenagers share to scare each other. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if it wasn't? What if I could hear Jessica's voice one more time? Tell her I was sorry for the fight we had that morning before she left for work. The fight that ended with me saying I sometimes wished I'd never met her. Words I would give anything to take back. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. So here I am, sitting in my Honda Civic at 11:27 p.m. on a Tuesday, staring at the hulking shadow of the West Ridge Galleria through my rain-spattered windshield. I brought Jessica's silver locket, the one she was wearing when we first met at Rayford Lake during that summer bonfire, where Malcolm Wright got so drunk he fell off the dock. The paramedics found it clutched in her hand after the accident. I haven't taken it out of its box since the funeral. I'm not stupid. I know this probably won't work. But what if it does? What if those Reddit posts weren't just stories? I have to try. For her. For me. For the life we were supposed to have in that little craftsman house on Elmwood Drive that I can't bring myself to sell. The digital clock on my dashboard flips to 11:35. It's time. I grab my backpack containing the flashlight, Jessica's locket, and a printed copy of the rules. As I step out into the drizzling rain, my phone buzzes. Dom, did you go? Taylor's missing. Her roommate can't find her, and she said Taylor was going to Westridge tonight. My finger hovers over the reply button, but I pocket the phone instead. Taylor Nichols isn't my problem. Besides, she probably just went to her boyfriend's place and forgot to tell her roommate. Or maybe she's hiding out somewhere, laughing at how her disappearance is freaking everyone out. That sounds like something Taylor would do. She always loved being the center of attention, even back when we briefly dated before I met Jessica. The service entrance is exactly where the instructions said it would be. A rusted metal door behind the crumbling remains of what was once Drummond's. The lock is broken, hanging uselessly from the latch. I check my watch. 11:37 p.m. 1 minute to go. As I wait, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I glance around the empty parking lot, but there's nothing except the skeletal remains of light posts and the occasional piece of wind-blown trash. Just my nerves getting to me. 11:38 p.m. exactly. I pull the heavy door open, wincing at the screech of rusted hinges. The darkness beyond is absolute, a void that seems to devour the weak beam of my phone's flashlight. The stench hits me immediately. Mildew and rot and something else underneath, something chemical and wrong. I step inside, letting the door close behind me with a hollow boom that echoes through the empty service corridor. For a moment, I consider turning back. This is insane, right? Breaking into an abandoned mall in the middle of the night because of some internet ghost story. But then I think of Jessica's laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, how she'd kiss the tip of my nose every morning before getting out of bed. Just one more conversation, one more chance to say goodbye properly. That's all I want. The corridor stretches ahead, barely illuminated by the faint emergency lights that still somehow have power. According to the map I memorized, I need to follow this hallway until it opens into what used to be Bennington's books. From there, I'll cross the central court, past the dead fountain where Trevor Miller allegedly proposed to Stacy Kim in 2012, then up the broken escalator to the 3rd floor. Simple. As I move deeper into the building, I notice something strange. Footprints in the dust. Recent ones. Someone else has been here. Taylor, maybe? Or someone else trying to play this sick game. The footprints lead toward the door at the end of the corridor, the entrance to what was once Bennington's books. As I approach, I hear something that makes me stop in my tracks. The unmistakable sound of splashing water. DeMarco's fountain coming to life somewhere in the darkness ahead. The game has begun. The sound of running water echoed through the service corridor, bouncing off concrete walls and metal pipes. Rule 3 immediately flashed in my mind. If you hear the sound of the DeMarco's Italian fountain running, cover your ears and close your eyes until it stops. I switched off my flashlight, clapped my hands over my ears, and squeezed my eyes shut. The The darkness behind my eyelids seemed to deepen, becoming an almost tangible pressure against my face. The sound of splashing water grew louder despite my covered ears, as if it were coming from inside my own head. Then something brushed against my arm. It felt like fingers. Cold, dry fingers tracing a line from my elbow to my wrist. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from screaming, tasting copper as blood filled my mouth. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but Rule 5 echoed in my head. Never run, even if you hear footsteps behind you. Running attracts them. I remained frozen in place, fighting against every cell in my body telling me to flee. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, the sound of the fountain stopped. I waited 3 more heartbeats, then cautiously opened my eyes and lowered my hands. The corridor was empty, illuminated only by the dim emergency lights. Whatever had touched me was gone, if it had ever been there at all. Maybe it was just my imagination, my nerves getting the better of me. I clicked my flashlight back on, its beam cutting through the gloom as I continued forward. The door at the end of the hallway opened into the darkened expanse of what used to be Bennington's books. The shelves were still here, empty and dusty, forming maze-like aisles through the darkness. I swept my flashlight across the room, taking in the desolation. Toppled bookshelves, water-damaged ceiling tiles, and the skeletal remains of the checkout counter where Jessica and I used to buy coffee table books we never actually read. I picked my way through the debris, following those same mysterious footprints in the dust. They led straight through Bennington's toward the exit into the main concourse. As I neared the storefront, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, a flash of something pale disappearing behind a bookshelf to my right. "Hello?" I called out softly, immediately regretting breaking the silence. No one answered, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't alone in here. I quickened my pace, reaching the exit to Bennington's books and stepping out into the central court of Westridge Galleria. The vast atrium stretched upward 3 floors, capped by a massive skylight that let in the faint glow of the night sky. Enough moonlight filtered through the grimy glass to illuminate the space in a ghostly blue pallor. Dead plants spilled from cracked planters, and the once gleaming tiles were now dull with years of dust and neglect. In the center stood the DeMarco's Italian fountain, a grandiose monstrosity commissioned by Antonio DeMarco himself when the mall first opened in 1982. The bronze statue of Venus rising from the waves was still intact, though heavily oxidized. The fountain basin was bone dry, as it should have been. So where had that water sound come from? I checked my watch. 11:52 p.m. Time moved differently in here, stretching and contracting like taffy. I needed to keep moving. According to the rules, I had to reach Timepiece Jewelers on the 3rd floor and place Jessica's locket on the counter by 3:33 a.m. To my right was the entrance to the East Wing, where Kitty Kingdom and Claire's accessories were located. Rule 4 was clear about those places. Do not enter Kitty Kingdom or Claire's accessories under any circumstances. I had no plans to disobey that particular instruction. Those places were creepy enough when the mall was still open. The escalators, of course, hadn't worked in years. I began climbing the motionless steps, my footfalls echoing in the empty space. Halfway up, I heard something that made me freeze. The distant sound of laughter, high-pitched and childlike, coming from somewhere on the 2nd floor. It seemed to be coming from the direction of Kitty Kingdom, despite it being on the completely opposite side of the mall. I gripped the rubber handrail tighter and continued my ascent, trying to ignore the way the laughter seemed to follow me. When I reached the 2nd floor landing, I paused to get my bearings. The mall directory sign was still mounted on the wall, though several letters had fallen off and the backlight was long dead. I traced my finger along the faded map, plotting my route to the third-floor central escalator. A soft rustling sound made me turn around. At the far end of the corridor, barely visible in the gloom, stood what appeared to be a mannequin. It hadn't been there when I'd come up the escalator. I was sure of it. Rule 6. If you see a mannequin where there wasn't one before, walk backward slowly until you can't see it anymore. My heart hammering in my chest, I began taking slow, deliberate steps backward, keeping my eyes fixed on the distant figure. It remained perfectly still, a white silhouette against the darkness. As I continued to back away, I realized there was something off about its proportions. The arms seemed too long, the head tilted at an unnatural angle. The mannequin twitched, just a slight movement, but unmistakable. Its head jerked to one side like a bird studying its prey. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to run as I continued my backwards retreat. My back hit something solid, a wall. I'd backed up as far as I could go, but the mannequin was still visible, a pale shape in the shadows. It took a step forward. The movement was jerky, almost mechanical, but deliberate. It was coming toward me. Panic rose in my throat like bile. Rule 5 said not to run, but what choice did I have? I couldn't back up any further, and the mannequin was advancing. I glanced to my left and noticed a store entrance, Suncoast Video, where Jessica and I used to browse horror movies we were too scared to actually watch. Without thinking, I ducked inside, pressing myself against the wall just inside the entrance. I held my breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps, slow and methodical, coming down the corridor toward Suncoast. They stopped just outside. I could sense it standing there, just beyond the entrance, waiting. My legs trembled with the effort of remaining still. Sweat trickled down my back despite the chill in the air. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Finally, the footsteps resumed, moving away down the corridor until they faded entirely. I exhaled shakily, allowing myself to relax slightly. That was close. Too close. I gave it another minute before cautiously peeking out of the store. The corridor was empty once more. No sign of the mannequin, if that's what it had actually been. I stepped back out, orienting myself toward the central escalator that would take me to the third floor. As I walked, I noticed that the footprints I'd been following earlier had reappeared in the dust. They paralleled my path, as if someone else were making the same journey I was. Taylor Nichols? Or something else. The second set of escalators loomed ahead. I began the climb to the third floor, where Timepiece Jewelers waited. The locket felt heavy in my pocket, like it was made of lead instead of silver. Jessica had loved that locket. It contained a tiny photo of us from our first anniversary, smiling and unaware of how little time we actually had. When I reached the third floor, I paused again, listening. The mall was silent now. No laughter, no footsteps, no running water. Just the occasional creak and groan of the building settling and the soft patter of rain against the skylight above. Timepiece Jewelers was directly ahead, its once elegant storefront now a tarnished shadow of its former glory. The glass display cases were empty, their contents long since looted or removed. A thick layer of dust covered everything, undisturbed save for... I frowned, moving closer. There were handprints on the main counter, fresh ones with distinct finger marks dragged through the dust. And next to them, something that made my blood run cold. A small silver ring I recognized immediately. It was Taylor's class ring from Emerson High, with its distinctive blue stone and engraved falcon mascot. I'd given it to her when we dated briefly senior year, before I met Jessica. She'd tried to return it after we broke up, but I told her to keep it. Now, here it was, sitting on the counter of Timepiece Jewelers in an abandoned mall at midnight. What the hell had happened to Taylor Nichols? I stared at Taylor's ring, a cold weight settling in my stomach. Had she completed the ritual? Was she here somewhere? Or had something happened to her? Something connected to the rules I was currently following? I pocketed the ring and checked my watch. 12:28 a.m. Still hours to go before the 3:33 deadline. I surveyed the jewelry store, noting the shattered display cases and graffiti-covered walls. Behind the main counter, a door led to what I assumed was a back office or storage room. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped behind the counter, pushing open the door with a creak that seemed deafening in the silence. The beam of my flashlight revealed a small office. Desk overturned, filing cabinets yanked open, papers scattered everywhere. Standard abandoned building chaos, until I spotted something out of place. On the desk sat an old cassette player, the kind with a built-in recorder. It looked clean, almost new compared to the decade of dust covering everything else. Next to it was a tape labeled simply TN in neat handwriting. Taylor Nichols. My hand hovered over the player. Was this part of the ritual? The rules hadn't mentioned anything about recordings, but then again the rules also hadn't mentioned what I should do if I found evidence someone else had been here before me. I pressed play. Static crackled, then Taylor's voice filled the small room, instantly recognizable with that slight southern lilt she'd never quite lost despite her efforts to sound more cosmopolitan. Testing, testing. Okay, it's recording. It's Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. I'm in Westridge Galleria following the instructions from that Reddit post. So far, everything's going according to plan. I made it through Bennington's without any problems, though I swear I heard someone following me, probably just nerves. A pause, then the sound of footsteps and Taylor's breathing. I'm heading toward the central escalator now. God, this place is creepy at night. I keep seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turn, there's nothing. A sudden intake of breath. Then, there's a mannequin at the end of the hall. It wasn't there a second ago. The rules say to back away slowly. I'm backing up now. The sound of shuffling footsteps, then a loud crash followed by a startled yelp. Shit, I tripped over something. I'm okay, but... Wait. The mannequin moved. It's closer now. I'm going to run. I know the rules say not to, but... The recording cut off with the sound of pounding footsteps. When it resumed, Taylor's voice was hushed, panicked. It's following me. I lost it for a while in Suncoast, but I can hear it moving around outside. I'm hiding in the old radio shack now. The rules... I broke the rules. I ran. What happens when you break the rules? Another pause, longer this time. When Taylor spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Something's in here with me. I can feel it breathing. I'm going to try to make it to Timepiece Jewelers. If you find this, my name is Taylor Nichols. Tell my parents I love them. Tell Dom I... The tape ended with a sound I couldn't quite identify. A wet, tearing noise followed by a strangled scream that cut off abruptly. I ejected the tape with trembling fingers, shoving it into my pocket alongside Taylor's ring. My flashlight beam bounced wildly around the room as my hand shook. She'd run. She'd broken Rule 5 and something had found her. I needed to be more careful. I exited the back office, returning to the main area of Timepiece Jewelers. According to the rules, I needed to place Jessica's locket on the counter and wait until 3:33 a.m. It was only 12:37 now, nearly 3 hours of waiting in this dust-filled tomb. Something shuffled in the corridor outside. I froze, listening intently. The sound came again, a dragging footstep, like someone limping heavily. Keeping my flashlight pointed at the ground to minimize its visibility, I crept to the entrance of the store and peered out. A figure was making its way slowly down the corridor, moving with that same unnatural, jerky gait I'd seen in the mannequin earlier. But this wasn't a mannequin. It was too fluid, too purposeful. As it came closer, passing through a shaft of moonlight from above, I caught a glimpse of blonde hair and a familiar green jacket. Taylor. I nearly called out before stopping myself. Something was wrong. Her movements were wrong, her head hanging at an unnatural angle, and behind her she left a trail of dark, wet footprints. I retreated deeper into the jewelry store, heart hammering in my chest. That wasn't Taylor. Not anymore. Rule 6 echoed in my head. If you see a mannequin where there wasn't one before, walk backwards slowly until you can't see it anymore. But this wasn't a mannequin exactly. Still, the principle seemed sound. I backed away until I could no longer see the storefront, taking shelter behind a fallen display case. The dragging footsteps grew louder as whatever was once Taylor entered the store. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't find me. The footsteps stopped. I heard a soft thud, like something being placed on the counter, then a wet, gurgling sound that might have been speech, but was too distorted to make out words. The footsteps resumed, moving away, growing fainter until silence returned. I waited several minutes before cautiously emerging from my hiding place. The thing that looked like Taylor was gone, but it had left something on the counter, a small silver object gleaming dully in the dim light. I approached carefully, keeping my flashlight beam low. It was another locket, almost identical to Jessica's, but when I opened it, the photo inside showed Taylor and her grandfather, the one she'd allegedly communicated with through this ritual. The locket was wet with something dark and viscous that I refused to identify. I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Had Taylor completed the ritual successfully? Was this evidence that it actually worked? Or had something gone horribly wrong because she broke the rules? My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out to find 3 missed calls and several texts from Dom. "Ethan, where are you? Taylor's roommate is freaking out. Seriously, man, call me back. The police are getting involved." The most recent sent just seconds ago. "Are you at Westridge? Taylor's car is still in the parking lot. I'm coming to find you." No, I muttered, quickly typing a response. "I'm fine. Do not come here. I'll be out soon. Stay away from the mall." I hit send, but the message failed to deliver. No signal. Of course. Great. Now Dom was potentially on his way to join this nightmare. I checked my watch. 1:05 a.m., still over 2 hours before the appointed time. I couldn't leave. That would mean giving up my chance to speak with Jessica, but I couldn't let Dom walk into this either. An idea struck me. The rules said I needed to place Jessica's locket on the counter and wait until 3:33 a.m. They didn't specify that I had to stay in the jewelry store the entire time. Maybe I could intercept Dom at the entrance, warn him off, and get back here before the deadline. But what if that was breaking the rules? The instructions weren't explicit about staying put, but they weren't explicit about being able to leave either. Taylor had broken a rule, and look what happened to her. I weighed my options, pacing the dusty store. Dom had said he was coming to find me, but that didn't mean he was already here. He lived on the other side of Cartersville, at least 20 minutes away. If he'd just sent that text, I had time. As I debated, a new sound filled the dead mall. Music. Not the childlike laughter I'd heard earlier, but actual music playing faintly through the building's ancient PA system. It was "Never My Love" by The Association, Jessica's favorite song, the one we danced to at prom, at our engagement party, the one that would have been our first dance at our wedding. The music surrounded me, filling the space with its haunting melody. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. This couldn't be a coincidence. Jessica was here, or at least some part of her was reaching out to me through this twisted place. The music grew louder, clearer, as if the source were moving closer. It seemed to be coming from outside the store, back down the corridor toward the central court. I moved to the entrance, peering out cautiously. The corridor was empty, but the music pulled me like a physical force. I took a step out of the store, then another. The rules didn't say anything about music, only the fountain, mannequins, and those 2 forbidden stores. This had to be part of the ritual, right? Maybe this was how it worked. Jessica reaching out to me before our appointed meeting time. I found myself moving down the corridor, following the music that had meant so much to both of us. It grew louder with each step, beautiful and achingly familiar. For the first time since entering this nightmare mall, I felt something other than fear. Hope. The music led me to the balcony overlooking the central court, where a figure stood silhouetted against the pale moonlight streaming through the skylight. A slender female figure with long, dark hair cascading down her back. "Jessica?" I whispered, my voice breaking. The figure turned slowly, and I felt my heart stop. It looked like Jessica, the same heart-shaped face, the same full lips I'd kissed 1,000 times, but her eyes were wrong, completely black, like empty sockets, and her skin had a grayish pallor. She smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "Ethan," she said, her voice a perfect imitation of Jessica's warm contralto. "I've been waiting for you." She extended her hand toward me, and I noticed her fingers were too long, the joints bent at unnatural angles. Behind her, the music continued to play, but now it sounded distorted, wrong, as if the tape were being chewed up by the machine. I took an involuntary step backward, remembering the rules. This wasn't Jessica. This wasn't part of the ritual. This was something else entirely, using Jessica's face, her voice, her favorite song to lure me away from the jewelry store. Rule 7 flashed in my mind. When you reach the timepiece jewelers on the 3rd floor, place a personal item of the deceased on the counter and wait until exactly 3:33 a.m. I was supposed to wait. This was a test, or a trap. "You're not Jessica," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The thing wearing Jessica's face tilted its head at an impossible angle, its smile widening until it split its cheeks. "Don't you want to dance with me, Ethan? One last dance before the world ends?" The thing wearing Jessica's face took a step toward me, its movements fluid yet somehow wrong, like a puppet with too many strings. The music warped further, the familiar melody dissolving into discordant noise. "Don't you miss me, Ethan?" it asked, Jessica's voice layered with something else, a rasping, hungry undertone that made my skin crawl. "Don't you want to hold me again?" Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I remembered Taylor's fate. Never run, even if you hear footsteps behind you. Running attracts them. Instead, I began backing away slowly, keeping my eyes on the thing that wasn't Jessica. "You're not her," I repeated, my voice steadier than I expected. "This isn't how the ritual works." The Jessica thing's smile faltered, its head jerking to one side with a sickening crack. "Ritual? Is that what you think this is? A little game with rules that will protect you?" It laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "There are older things here than your little internet ghost stories, Ethan Sullivan." I hadn't told it my last name. A chill ran down my spine as I continued my careful retreat. The thing advanced, matching my pace step for step. The distorted music faded, replaced by a low, persistent hum that seemed to vibrate through the entire building. "They all come here thinking they understand," it continued, its voice shifting between Jessica's familiar tones and something ancient and cold. Taylor, Marcus, even little Amy Jenkins back in 2018. They all thought they knew the rules. I felt my back hit the wall, nowhere left to go. The thing was only feet away now, close enough that I could smell it. A cloying sweetness underneath which lurked the unmistakable scent of decay. But you're different, aren't you, Ethan? You're being so careful, following all the rules. It cocked its head, studying me with those empty black eyes. I wonder how long that will last. Suddenly, a crash echoed from somewhere on the lower level, glass breaking, followed by a man's voice calling out. Ethan? Taylor? Is anybody here? Dom. He'd actually come. The Jessica thing's head snapped toward the sound, its neck stretching impossibly as if to better hear. Then it turned back to me, its grin widening. Sounds like your friend has arrived? Should we go greet him? Without waiting for a response, it skittered away with inhuman speed, moving on all fours like some grotesque spider wearing Jessica's skin. It disappeared over the balcony railing, dropping to the floor below with a wet thud. Dom, run! I shouted, forgetting the rules in my panic. Get out of here! My voice echoed through the empty mall, bouncing off walls and returning to me distorted and strange. There was no response from Dom, only an eerie silence that seemed to swallow even the hum that had pervaded the building. I stood frozen, torn between hiding in Timepiece Jewelers as the rules dictated and trying to save my friend. The rules had said nothing about other people entering the mall during the ritual. Was this part of the test? Or had Dom just blundered into something he couldn't possibly understand? The silence stretched, becoming almost tangible. Then, from below, a scream, high and tight with terror, abruptly cut off. Dom's scream. Fuck the rules, I muttered, sprinting toward the escalator. Whatever was happening to Dom, I couldn't just hide and let it happen. I'd known him since freshman orientation at Emerson State. He'd helped me through the darkest days after Jessica's death, bringing over pizza and beer, making sure I ate something, anything. Flew down the motionless escalator steps, nearly losing my footing in my haste. As I reached the lower level, I swept my flashlight across the central court, looking for any sign of Dom or the Jessica thing. The beam caught something moving near the DeMarco's Italian fountain, a dark shape hunched over something on the ground. As I watched, it raised its head, and light reflected off eyes that gleamed red in the darkness. Not the Jessica thing, something else. I killed the flashlight immediately, plunging myself back into near darkness. The only illumination came from the moonlight filtering through the skylight above, casting the central court in a ghostly blue glow. I pressed myself against a pillar, watching the shape by the fountain. It sniffed the air, turning its head this way and that, searching. For Dom? For me? I couldn't tell. After a moment, it returned its attention to whatever lay at its feet. I heard wet, tearing sounds that made my stomach lurch. Taking advantage of its distraction, I began creeping around the perimeter of the court, keeping to the shadows. I needed to find Dom, but I also needed to get back to Timepiece Jewelers before 3:33. The rules were clear on that point, and after what I'd seen happen to Taylor, I wasn't EI-ager to test them further. I checked my watch. 1:47 a.m., still plenty of time, assuming I survived the next few minutes. As I made my way around the court, I spotted another dark shape ahead, a human form sprawled on the tiles near the entrance to what had once been an orange Julius. I approached cautiously, dreading what I might find. It was Dom. He lay face down, unmoving, a pool of something dark spreading beneath him. I reached out with trembling fingers, touching his shoulder. "Dom?" I whispered. He groaned, shifting slightly. "Thank God. He was alive. I carefully rolled him over, trying to assess his injuries in the dim light. His face was pale and drawn with pain, but what made my heart stutter was the state of his left arm, or what remained of it. The limb ended in a ragged stump just below the elbow, the wound seeping blood that appeared black in the moonlight. "Jesus Christ," I breathed. "Dom, what happened?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Ethan? That you?" His voice was thin, reedy with shock and blood loss. "Yeah, it's me. We need to get you out of here." I began removing my belt, intending to use it as a tourniquet. Dom's right hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. "No," he rasped. "Can't leave. Rules." I stared at him. "You know about the rules?" "Dom, you're bleeding out. We need to get you to a hospital." He shook his head weakly. "Came to warn you. Taylor, not the first. People disappear every few years, always on Tuesdays." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Not a ritual, a feeding. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "What are you talking about?" "Mall's hungry, Ethan. Has been since they built it. The rules? They're not to help you communicate with the dead. They're to prepare you, tenderize you." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Then why are you here? Why didn't you just call the police?" Dom's laugh turned into another wet cough. "Tried. No one believes. Had to come. Warn you myself." His eyes rolled back momentarily before focusing on me again. "Thing took my arm. Not like the others, though. This one's new." "What do you mean, new?" "Old things here, ancient. But this one, wearing Jessica, it's fresh. Still remembers being human." The Jessica thing. It wasn't just using Jessica's appearance. It was somehow made from her. The thought made me physically ill. Dom's grip on my wrist tightened. "Listen, only way out now. Finish the ritual, play by their rules, but know the real game. When you put the locket down, be ready." "Ready for what?" His eyes slid past me, widening in terror. "Behind you!" I whirled around just as a massive shape lunged from the shadows. I caught a glimpse of too many limbs, too many eyes, before it slammed into me, sending me sprawling across the tile floor. My flashlight skittered away, its beam cutting wild arcs through the darkness. The thing crouched over Dom, who screamed once before the sound was cut off with a sickening crunch. I scrambled backward, gasping for breath as the creature gorged itself. I couldn't watch. I couldn't help. All I could do was live long enough to finish what I'd started. I found my feet and ran, forgetting Rule 5 in my blind panic. The thing's wet feeding sounds pursued me as I dashed toward the escalator, taking the steps two at a time. I didn't look back, didn't slow down until I reached Timepiece Jewelers and collapsed behind the counter, heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Dom was gone. Just like Taylor. Just like who knew how many others who'd tried to play this twisted game over the years. And it wasn't a game at all, was it? It was a trap. A well-baited hook to lure in the grieving, the desperate. People like me who would do anything for one more moment with someone they'd lost. I checked my watch through tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. 2:12 a.m. Still over an hour before the appointed time. An hour hiding here, hoping those things didn't find me, knowing what would happen if they did. But what would happen at 3:33? Dom had said to be ready, but ready for what? If this wasn't a ritual to communicate with the dead, but instead some kind of feeding, then what was the point of the specific time? Why the locket? I retrieved Jessica's locket from my pocket, running my thumb over its tarnished surface. Inside was the photo of us, young and happy, and unaware of how quickly it would all be taken away. I'd brought it thinking it would connect me to her spirit. Now I wondered if it would connect me to something else, something that wore her face but wasn't her at all. As I crouched there in the dust and darkness, a new sound reached my ears, the steady drip of water. The DeMarco's Italian fountain was running again. Rule 3 flashed in my mind. If you hear the sound of the DeMarco's Italian fountain running, cover your ears and close your eyes until it stops. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my palms against my ears, but the sound only grew louder. Drip, drip, drip. It seemed to be coming from directly above me. Slowly, reluctantly, I opened my eyes and looked up. The ceiling was weeping. Dark liquid oozed between the tiles, gathering into heavy drops that fell with hypnotic regularity. Drip, drip, drip. One landed on my cheek, warm and viscous. I wiped it away and my fingers came back red. Blood. The ceiling was crying blood. I scrambled out from under it, backing away until I hit the store's front window. The dripping increased in tempo, becoming a steady stream that pooled on the floor where I'd been crouching. The blood spread, darkening the dust, moving with purpose toward me as if drawn by some unseen force. "Stay back," I whispered, though I knew it was ridiculous to address a pool of blood as if it could hear me. But it did hear. The flow stopped abruptly, the edge of the pool rippling slightly as if in response to my voice. Then, before my disbelieving eyes, it began to rise upward, forming a column that gradually took on a human shape. A woman's shape. Jessica's shape. This wasn't like the thing I'd encountered earlier. This was purer somehow, less substantial, like it was made of shadow and memory rather than corrupted flesh. It had Jessica's form down to the smallest detail, the slight crook in her nose from when she'd broken it playing soccer in high school, the tiny scar on her chin from a childhood mishap with a swing set. "Ethan," it said, and God help me, it was her voice. Not the distorted, hungry version from before, but Jessica's voice, soft and sad and so achingly familiar it brought fresh tears to my eyes. "You're not real," I said, my voice breaking. "You can't be." The blood shadow tilted its head, a gesture so quintessentially Jessica that I felt my resolve wavering. "What is real, Ethan?" "The rules, the ritual, this place." It gestured around the abandoned store. "None of it is what you think it is. None of it is what they told you." "Then what is it?" I asked, still pressed against the window, unwilling to move closer, but equally unable to look away. "A threshold," the Jessica shadow replied, "a crossing point between what was and what might be, between the living and something else. The dead." It smiled, a sad thing that didn't reach its eyes. "Death is just another word for transformation. We don't end, Ethan. We change." I swallowed hard, trying to process what I was hearing. "So, the ritual, it works. I can actually talk to Jessica." "You're talking to me now, aren't you?" it said, spreading its arms. "But is that what you really came for? To talk? Or did you come seeking absolution for the fight, for the words you can never take back?" I flinched as if struck. How could it know about that? Unless... "Jessica," I whispered, allowing myself to hope for the first time since entering this nightmare. The blood shadow's smile deepened, becoming something hungry and wrong. "Oh, Ethan, you really should have followed the rules." It lunged forward, its form dissolving into a spray of blood that engulfed me like a wave. I screamed, flailing blindly as the warm liquid invaded my nose, my mouth, my eyes, choking me, drowning me in the heart of the abandoned mall. I clawed at my face, desperate to clear the blood from my eyes, my mouth, my nostrils. It filled my lungs, drowning me from the inside. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The world dissolved into red agony as I thrashed against the window, my body convulsing in its death throes. Then, as suddenly as it had engulfed me, the blood retreated, slithering away across the floor like a living thing. I collapsed to my knees, retching and gasping, spitting out mouthfuls of the foul liquid. Impossibly, my lungs worked again, drawing in ragged breaths of the mall's stale air that tasted sweeter than any oxygen I'd ever known. "That was just a taste," said a voice above me. Jessica's voice, but not. A small sample of what awaits at 3:33. I looked up through watery eyes. The blood shadow stood over me, once again in Jessica's form, but with subtle differences. Its proportions slightly wrong, its movements too fluid, too calculated. What are you?" I wheezed, fighting back another wave of nausea. "I'm what you came for," it replied, its voice layered with multiple tones, as if several people were speaking in unison. "I'm the voice you wanted to hear, the face you wanted to see." It knelt, bringing its face level with mine. "I'm also much, much older than your Jessica ever was." I fought the urge to scramble away, forcing myself to meet its gaze. The rules, this ritual, it's all a trap, isn't it? The blood shadow smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. "Of course it is, but not in the way you think." It stood, drifting toward the jewelry counter in a motion too smooth to be walking. "Humans are so arrogant. You think you're the hunters, the seekers, the ones in control. You find a set of rules on the internet and think, if I follow these perfectly, I'll get what I want." It ran a finger along the dusty counter, leaving a streak of red. "But what if the rules weren't made for you to follow? What if they were made for us? I don't understand." The Westridge Galleria was built in 1982, but this place, this exact spot, has been a crossing point for centuries. The Muskogee people knew to avoid it. The early settlers who ignored the warnings disappeared. Then came the mall developers with their bulldozers and cement mixers, thinking they could pave over the old powers. The blood shadow's form rippled, briefly showing something ancient and terrible beneath Jessica's familiar features, before solidifying again. They built their temple to consumerism right on top of us, thinking their fluorescent lights and cheerful muzak would drive us away. Instead, we adapted. We learned new ways to feed. I struggled to my feet, using the wall for support. "Feed? On what?" "Grief," it said simply. "Desperation, hope, the raw emotion of humans at their most vulnerable. When your Jessica died, your pain was like a beacon, drawing us to you, drawing you to us." My mind reeled. None of this made sense, yet it explained everything. The specific requirements of the ritual, the bizarre rules, the way it all felt like some sick game. So there was never any chance of talking to Jessica? This was all just... what? Some elaborate buffet? The blood shadow tilted its head, studying me with eyes that were becoming less and less human by the second. "Oh, there's a chance. That's the beautiful part of the trap. The bait is real. At 3:33, the veil is thinnest. If you're strong enough, clever enough, you might actually reach her, briefly, before we take you both." I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m., less than an hour until the appointed time. My options were limited. I could try to run, to escape the mall entirely, but after what happened to Dom, to Taylor, I doubted I'd make it to the exit. I could wait here, place the locket as instructed, and face whatever came at 3:33. Or, what if I don't play by your rules anymore? I challenged, straightening up despite the pain in my chest. What if I refuse to put the locket on the counter, refuse to summon Jessica or whatever part of her you're using as bait? The blood shadow's smile widened, splitting its face well past where a human mouth should end. "Then you die here, alone and forgotten, like so many before you. The rules aren't just for show, Ethan. They're boundaries, limitations on what we can do. Break them, and those limitations disappear. It drifted closer, its form rippling between Jessica and something far more grotesque. But please, by all means, test that theory. We're hungry either way. Before I could respond, a new sound cut through the tense silence. My phone, ringing with a generic ringtone I hadn't heard in months. I pulled it from my pocket with shaking hands, expecting to see Dom's number, or perhaps Taylor's roommate still searching for her missing friend. The caller ID read, Jessica Rourke. The blood shadow's expression shifted, surprise, and something like fear flashing across its features. It hissed, backing away slightly. "That's not possible," it whispered. My thumb hovered over the screen. Rule 6 from the original instructions echoed in my mind. If you see a mannequin where there wasn't one before, walk backwards slowly until you can't see it anymore. But there was nothing about phone calls, nothing about what to do if the dead called you before the appointed time. I answered. "Hello?" Static crackled through the speaker, interspersed with fragments of a woman's voice. Jessica's voice, but distant, distorted, as if coming from somewhere impossibly far away. "Ethan, don't. Trap. The rules aren't. Protect." The blood shadow lunged forward, its form dissolving into a spray that knocked the phone from my hand. It clattered across the floor, still emitting bursts of static and broken words. I dove for it, but the blood shadow reformed between me and the phone, its shape no longer even attempting to mimic Jessica. What stood before me now was a towering amalgamation of limbs and eyes and gaping mouths, its body constantly shifting and reforming like liquid smoke. It loomed over me, radiating ancient hunger and rage. "Enough!" it boomed, its voice reverberating through the abandoned mall. "You were told the rules. You will obey." The entire building seemed to respond to its fury, the floor trembling, lights flickering in stores that should have had no power, a distant chorus of whispers rising from every shadowed corner. The thing reached for me with appendages that were neither arms nor tentacles, but something in between, their touch burning like acid where they grazed my skin. I scrambled backward, knocking over a display case that shattered against the floor. The crash was deafening in the enclosed space, and the creature recoiled momentarily from the sudden noise. I seized the opportunity, diving past it toward my fallen phone, still emitting Jessica's fragmented voice. "Midnight. Center Court. Remember us. True ritual." I snatched up the phone just as one of the creature's limbs slammed down, barely missing my hand and cracking the tile where it struck. The screen was shattered. The call ended, but Jessica's message burned in my mind. Midnight. Center Court. The true ritual. But it was well past midnight now. What did she mean? My eyes fell on the shattered display case, and among the broken glass, I spotted an old-fashioned clock, a Timex with an analog face, its hands frozen at 12 o'clock. Of course. Midnight at the center of the mall, the DeMarco's Italian fountain. That's where the real ritual was supposed to take place, not here at Timepiece Jewelers. The rules I'd been following weren't to help me communicate with Jessica. They were to keep me from finding the truth. I turned to run, but the creature blocked my path, filling the store entrance with its writhing mass. Its countless mouths opened in unison, each speaking with the voice of someone different, someone who had come to the mall seeking their lost loved ones, only to become part of this monstrosity. "You cannot leave," they said in terrible harmony. "The feeding will commence at 3:33. I backed away, my mind racing. I needed to get to the center court, to the fountain, but this thing wasn't going to let me walk out. My gaze darted around the store, seeking any possible escape route. Behind the counter, the door to the back office stood ajar. If I could reach it, maybe there was another way out. A service corridor, an emergency exit, anything. The creature sensed my intention and surged forward, its mass blocking more of the store with each passing second. I feinted left, then dove right, rolling across the display counter and landing hard on the other side. Before the creature could reorient itself, I sprinted for the back office, slamming the door behind me. There was no lock, nothing to barricade the flimsy door against the nightmare pursuing me. But there, in the far wall, half hidden behind an overturned filing cabinet, an access panel, the kind maintenance workers use to reach the space between stores. I shoved the cabinet aside as the door behind me began to bulge inward, the wood splintering under some immense pressure. The access panel was small, barely large enough for a person to squeeze through, secured with a simple latch that broke easily under my desperate strength. Beyond was darkness, a narrow maintenance corridor running between the stores. I dove in head first, just as the office door exploded inward, the creature's rage manifesting as a physical force that sent debris flying across the small room. I didn't look back, couldn't afford to. I crawled through the dusty passage as quickly as I could, hearing the thing trying to force its massive bulk into the narrow space behind me. The walls around me shuddered as it screamed in frustration, unable to follow. The passage ended at another access panel. I kicked it open, tumbling out into what had once been a Victoria's Secret. Now just an empty space with a few broken mannequins scattered about. I got to my feet, orienting myself. If I remembered the mall layout correctly, the central court was just ahead. I checked my watch. 3:12 a.m. 21 minutes until the creature's feeding time. But if Jessica's fragmented message was right, I needed to be at the fountain, not the jewelry store, when that moment came. I crept to the store entrance, peering out cautiously. The corridor was empty, but I could hear something massive moving through the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The creature, or perhaps the mall itself, hunting me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the corridor and began running toward the central court. Jessica's locket clutched tightly in my fist, praying I'd understood her message correctly. Behind me, the walls began to bleed. The central court loomed ahead, bathed in ghostly moonlight filtering through the skylight 3 stories above. The DeMarco's Italian fountain stood in the center, bone dry and silent, its bronze Venus staring impassively across the abandoned mall. I approached cautiously, every sense heightened, waiting for the creature to emerge from the shadows and drag me back to its feeding ground. But the court remained eerily quiet. No blood dripping from the walls, no whispers from the darkness, no monstrous shape blocking my path. Just the hollow emptiness of a dead mall and the steady tick of my watch counting down the minutes until 3:33. I reached the fountain's edge at 3:17 a.m., circling it warily. The massive basin was cracked in several places, lined with years of dust and dead leaves that had somehow found their way inside. Venus rose from the center, her arms outstretched in a gesture that once might have seemed welcoming, but now looked more like a plea for help. "Okay, Jessica," I whispered, clutching her locket tightly. "I'm here. What now?" As if in response, a gust of cold air swept through the court, swirling the dust in the fountain basin into miniature cyclones. I shivered, not just from the chill, but from the certainty that something was watching me. Many somethings, hidden just beyond the veil of perception. I checked my watch again. 3:19 a.m. 14 minutes until whatever was supposed to happen at 3:33. 14 minutes to figure out what Jessica had been trying to tell me about the true ritual. The locket felt warm in my hand, almost pulsing with a life of its own. I ran my thumb over its tarnished surface, feeling the intricate engravings that decorated the silver heart. Jessica had worn it every day since I'd given it to her on our first anniversary. Inside was our photo, young and smiling, blissfully unaware of the tragedy that would tear us apart. I opened the locket, gazing at our faces in the dim light. We looked so happy, so certain that our love would last forever. In a way, I suppose it had. What else could have driven me to this abandoned mall in the middle of the night, following cryptic rules in the desperate hope of hearing her voice one more time? A drop of water hit the photo with a soft plop. I looked up, expecting to see blood seeping from the ceiling, but there was nothing above me except the skylight. Another drop fell, this time landing on my hand. It was clear, not red, just water. As I watched, more drops began to fall into the fountain basin, creating tiny pockmarks in the dust. The fountain was activating. A distant hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second, the sound of ancient pumps coming to life deep beneath the mall. Water began to flow from Venus's outstretched hands, trickling at first, then streaming down into the basin where it swirled in patterns that seemed too deliberate to be random. Rule 3 flashed through my mind. If you hear the sound of the DeMarco's Italian fountain running, cover your ears and close your eyes until it stops. But that rule had been part of the trap. The false ritual designed to lead me to Timepiece Jewelers, where the creature waited. What if the opposite was true? What if I was supposed to listen, to watch? I stared into the swirling water, which was beginning to glow with a soft blue light that came from nowhere and everywhere. The water rose higher, filling the basin with impossible speed, yet never overflowing. Within its depths, shadows moved, human shapes dancing and twisting in a strange, silent ballet. Ethan. Jessica's voice, clear and unmistakable, came from directly behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, to find her standing there. Not the blood shadow monstrosity that had tormented me, but Jessica as she had been in life. Warm, solid, real. "Jess," I whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly would break whatever spell had brought her here. She smiled, that crooked smile that had always made my heart skip a beat. "It's me, the real me, not that thing wearing my face." I wanted to run to her, to throw my arms around her and never let go, but caution held me back. "How do I know it's really you? How do I know this isn't another trap?" "You don't," she said simply. "That's faith, Ethan. That's love. But if you need proof..." She stepped closer, her movements fluid and natural, nothing like the jerky, wrong motions of the creature. "The morning before the accident, we fought about your mother's birthday party. You said you didn't want to go because you couldn't stand watching her get drunk and embarrass herself again. I told you to grow up and be there for her anyway." My throat tightened. No one else could have known about that fight. We'd been alone in our kitchen, no witnesses except the half-empty coffee cups and the morning sunlight streaming through the window. "You said you sometimes wished you'd never met me," Jessica continued, her voice soft with remembered pain. "And I walked out without saying goodbye. That's why you're here, isn't it? To take those words back." Tears blurred my vision. "I didn't mean it. God, Jess, I swear I didn't mean it. It was just a stupid fight, and then you were gone, and I never got to tell you." "I know," she said, closing the distance between us. "I've always known." Her hand touched my cheek, warm and solid and real. I leaned into it, a sob catching in my throat. This was Jessica, my Jessica, not some monstrous approximation using her voice and face to lure me to my doom. "What's happening, Jess? What is this place? That thing said it feeds on grief, on hope." Jessica's expression darkened. It wasn't lying about that. The Westridge Galleria was built on a crossing point, a place where the boundary between worlds is thin. But the mall itself was designed as a prison, not a feeding ground. A prison? For what? For them. The old ones. The things that were here long before humans built shopping malls and parking garages. She gestured to the fountain, where the dancing shadows had grown more numerous, more agitated. The original builders knew what they were doing. The DeMarco family has protected crossing points for generations. The fountain was a seal, designed to keep those things contained. I glanced at the water, now glowing bright enough to illuminate the entire central court. Then why is it active now? Why tonight? Because the seal is failing, Jessica said urgently. It has been for years, ever since the mall closed and the regular rituals stopped. Antonio DeMarco used to perform them himself, midnight on the first Tuesday of every month, reinforcing the boundaries with salt and silver and prayer. Understanding dawned, and when the mall went bankrupt and closed, the rituals stopped. The creatures began to break free, finding ways to lure people in with false rules and promises of communion with the dead. Each victim made them stronger. Each death weakened the seal further. Jessica's eyes were intense, focused. But there's a reason they targeted you specifically, Ethan. The DeMarcos aren't the only family with a connection to this place. What are you talking about? Your grandmother's maiden name, what was it? I frowned, confused by the apparent non sequitur. Hargrove, Eleanor Hargrove. What does that have to do with... Eleanor Hargrove was Antonio DeMarco's cousin, Jessica interrupted. Your family has the same protection abilities, the same blood that can reinforce the seal. That's why I was able to reach you through the phone, why I can appear to you now. Your blood calls to the boundary between worlds, just as mine calls to you. I struggled to process this revelation. My grandmother had rarely spoken about her family, and I'd never heard the name DeMarco connected to ours. But there had always been strange family superstitions. Never shop after midnight. Never enter a new building first. Always carry salt in your left pocket on Tuesdays. So, what do I do? I asked, checking my watch. 3:27 a.m. 6 minutes until whatever was supposed to happen at 3:33. Complete the true ritual, Jessica said, taking my hands in hers. The locket lay between our palms, warm and pulsing like a tiny heart. When the fountain reaches its peak at 3:33, add your blood to the water. Not much, 7 drops, 1 for each day of the week. Then recite the words that Eleanor taught you when you were 8. I blinked in surprise. The nightmare prayer. That nonsense rhyme about monsters under the bed. Jessica nodded solemnly. It was never nonsense, Ethan. Your grandmother was preparing you, just in case you ever found yourself in a situation like this. The fountain's glow intensified, and with it came a low, angry hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the mall. The shadows in the water moved more frantically now, pressing against some invisible barrier, as if trying to break free. They know what we're planning, Jessica said, her voice tight with urgency. They'll try to stop you. The blood shadow, the mannequins, all of them. They're different aspects of the same entity, fragments of the ancient thing imprisoned here. It will use everything it has to prevent the seal from being reinforced. As if summoned by her words, a terrible scream echoed through the mall, a sound no human throat could produce, filled with rage and hunger and ancient malice. The walls around the central court began to bleed, thick rivulets of red running down to pool on the floor. The blood moved with purpose, flowing toward the fountain like tiny crimson snakes. It's coming, Jessica said, her form flickering slightly. I can't stay much longer, Ethan. The boundary is stretching thin, but it works both ways. I can reach across to you, but so can they. Don't go, I pleaded, tightening my grip on her hands. "I just found you again." Her smile was sad, tinged with an acceptance I was still struggling to find. "I'm never far, Ethan. Not really. But you need to let me go to save yourself, to save everyone who might become victims if those things break free completely." The screaming grew louder, closer. The blood on the floor had reached the fountain's edge, beginning to climb its sides like some sentient ooze. Above us, the skylight cracked with a sound like a gunshot, spiderweb fractures spreading across the glass. 3:31, Jessica said, glancing at my watch. "Almost time." She leaned forward, pressing her lips to mine in a kiss that felt like coming home and saying goodbye all at once. When she pulled away, her form was translucent, fading. "Remember the words, Ethan. Remember who you are." And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the glowing fountain and the horrors closing in around me. The floor beneath my feet trembled as if something massive were moving underneath them all. The blood had nearly reached the fountain's rim, its progress slowing as it encountered the blue glow emanating from the water. From the corridors leading into the central court came sounds of movement, dragging footsteps, wet slithering, the click of too many limbs on tile. I had less than 2 minutes. The ritual seemed simple enough. 7 drops of blood at 3:33, followed by my grandmother's strange little prayer. But with the creatures of the mall converging on my position, nothing was simple. I pulled out my pocket knife, flicking it open with shaking hands. The blade gleamed in the fountain's blue light as I held it against my palm, ready to make the small cut necessary for the ritual. The first of the mall's horrors appeared at the entrance to the east wing, the mannequin I'd encountered earlier, only now it moved with fluid grace, its blank face somehow conveying hunger despite its lack of features. From the west wing came the thing that had been following me, the blood shadow that wore Jessica's face like a mask, its form rippling and changing as it advanced. And from the north corridor, from the direction of Timepiece Jewelers, came something worse. A towering amalgamation of broken bodies and twisted faces, each one a person who had died within these walls. I recognized Dom's face among them, his eyes vacant, his mouth moving in silent screams. The creatures paused at the edge of the central court, held back by some invisible boundary created by the fountain's glow. They paced and seethed, testing the limits of their confinement, searching for weakness. The blood shadow locked eyes with me, its stolen face contorting with hatred. "You cannot seal us again," it hissed, Jessica's voice layered with countless others. "We have grown too strong. We have fed too well." "Maybe," I replied, firming my grip on the knife, "but I'm still going to try." My watch beeped softly. 3:33 a.m. In one swift motion, I sliced my palm, flinching at the sharp sting. Blood welled up, dark against my skin. I held my hand over the fountain, letting 7 drops fall into the glowing water. 1, 2, 3. The creatures shrieked in unison, hurling themselves against the invisible barrier with renewed fury. The walls of the mall trembled, plaster raining down from the ceiling. The skylight cracked further, sharp fragments of glass falling like deadly rain. 4, 5, 6. The blood shadow stretched impossibly tall, its form becoming something ancient and terrible, shedding Jessica's appearance entirely. "We will devour you slowly," it promised, its voice shaking the very air. "We will feast on your soul for eternity." 7. As the final drop hit the water, the fountain erupted with blinding blue light. The creatures recoiled, their screams becoming wails of pain and fear. In that moment of brilliant clarity, I recited my grandmother's nightmare prayer, the words coming back to me as if I'd spoken them yesterday. Shadows creep and shadows crawl, but they cannot breach the wall. Blood of mine and words of power, seal them in their midnight tower. What was bound shall bound remain, till morning breaks the night in twain. By DeMarco's hand and Hargrove's heart, I command thee now, depart. The final word tore from my throat with a force that surprised even me, echoing through the mall with supernatural resonance. The fountain's light pulsed in response, expanding outward in a shock wave that slammed into the creatures with physical force. The mannequin shattered like glass, its pieces dissolving into smoke before they hit the ground. The twisted amalgamation of bodies collapsed in on itself, melting into a puddle that evaporated with a hiss of steam. The blood shadow screamed loudest of all, its form stretched and torn by the force of the ritual until it unraveled completely, dissipating like mist in the morning sun. For a moment, the entire mall seemed to hold its breath. Then the fountain's light began to fade, returning to a soft blue glow that illuminated only the central court. The blood that had been climbing the fountain's sides was gone, leaving the basin clean and pure. The water level lowered gradually until only a shallow pool remained, just enough to cover the bottom of the basin. I exhaled shakily, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. I sank to my knees beside the fountain, cradling my cut hand against my chest. Had it worked? Had I successfully reinforced the seal? The mall was silent now, no screams, no whispers, no sound of running water. Just the quiet emptiness of an abandoned building. I checked my watch. 3:36 a.m. The ritual had taken only 3 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. As the adrenaline faded, exhaustion took its place. I leaned against the fountain's edge, my eyelids heavy. Just a moment's rest, I told myself. Just a minute to catch my breath before I found my way out of this nightmare. Ethan. Jessica's voice again, soft and distant. I forced my eyes open to find her standing before me, her form transparent but stable, like a reflection in still water. Did it work? I asked, my voice hoarse from screaming. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It worked. The seal is reinforced stronger than before. They won't break free again, not for many years. Relief washed over me. And you? Are you trapped here too? No, Ethan. I was never part of this place, never bound by its rules or its hunger. I'm just elsewhere, watching over you as I always have. She knelt beside me, her form shimmering in the fountain's fading light. It's time for you to go. Dawn is coming and you shouldn't be here when the maintenance crews arrive. Maintenance crews? Antonio DeMarco's descendants. They'll come at first light to check the seal, to clean up whatever remains of the night's events. She brushed ethereal fingers against my cheek, a touch I could almost feel. They'll explain everything, help you understand your family's legacy. But for now, you need to go home. I nodded, too tired to argue, too overwhelmed to question. Will I see you again? Her smile deepened, warm and real despite her ghostly appearance. Look for me in dreams, Ethan. Look for me in the quiet moments between heartbeats. I'm never far. With those words, she faded completely, leaving me alone once more in the abandoned mall. But for the first time since her death, the emptiness inside me felt a little less hollow, the grief a little less crushing. I struggled to my feet, wrapping my cut hand in a handkerchief as I made my way toward the entrance. Behind me, the fountain went dark, its purpose fulfilled, until the next time the boundary needed reinforcement. The mall had taken Taylor, had taken Dom. It had nearly taken me. But it had also given me something I hadn't expected. Closure. Not the chance to take back the words said in anger, but the understanding that those words hadn't defined our love. Jessica had known how I felt, had always known, even beyond death. As I pushed through the service entrance and stepped into the pre-dawn air, I felt something close to peace. The sky was lightening in the east, the stars fading one by one. A new day was coming, and for the first time in 8 months, I was ready to face it. The sky had lightened to a pale gray by the time I reached my car in the abandoned parking lot. The Honda sat alone on the cracked asphalt, covered in a fine layer of early morning dew. I unlocked it with hands that still trembled from exhaustion and adrenaline, collapsing into the driver's seat with a heavy sigh. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the hulking shadow of the Westridge Galleria. From the outside, it looked like any other dead mall, a relic of 80s excess, slowly being reclaimed by nature. No hint of the horrors that lurked inside, no sign of the ancient power sealed beneath its foundation. I checked my phone. 5:17 a.m. 3 missed calls from Dom's roommate, a text from Taylor's sister asking if I'd seen her. What was I supposed to tell them? That their loved ones had been consumed by something ancient and hungry, that their bodies, or what remained of them, were now part of the mall itself. As I contemplated this impossible explanation, a pair of headlights swept across the parking lot. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled in, followed by 2 more identical vehicles. They parked in a row facing the mall, their engines cutting off in unison. Men and women in dark clothing emerged, 8 of them in total, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this many times before. They carried duffel bags and equipment cases, heading toward the same service entrance I'd used hours earlier, the maintenance crew Jessica had mentioned, Antonio DeMarco's descendants. I should have driven away then. I had survived the night, reinforced the seal, done what needed to be done. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, some newfound connection to my apparent family legacy, kept me rooted in place. One figure detached from the group, walking purposefully toward my car. A woman in her 50s, silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a severe bun, her olive complexion marked with the lines of experience rather than age. She tapped on my window, her expression unreadable. I hesitated, then rolled it down. Ethan Sullivan? Her voice was deep for a woman with a hint of an accent I couldn't place. How do you know my name? She smiled thinly. The same way I know you entered the mall at 11:38 p.m. last night seeking communion with Jessica Rourke. The same way I know you encountered the hunger and survived. The same way I know you reinforced the seal with your blood. She extended a hand. Sophia DeMarco. Antonio was my father. I shook her hand automatically, noticing the similarities between her fingers and my grandmother's. The same long, tapered shape, the same prominent knuckles. Jessica said you'd explain everything. Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly. You spoke with her? Truly spoke with her? Yes, she helped me understand what was happening, told me what to do. Interesting. Sophia glanced back at the mall, where her team was already disappearing inside. Most spirits can't manifest that clearly, even at a crossing point. She must have had a powerful connection to you. We were engaged, I said simply. Sophia nodded, as if this explained everything. You should come with us. There are things you need to know, responsibilities you've inherited whether you want them or not. Part of me wanted to refuse, to drive away and pretend none of this had happened. But the larger part, the part that had already accepted the impossible reality of what I'd experienced, knew there was no going back. I was involved now, connected to this place and its secrets by blood and deed. What about Dom? And Taylor? Their families will be looking for them. A shadow crossed Sophia's face. We'll recover what we can, give their families closure, if not the whole truth. It's the best we can offer." She checked her watch. "We don't have much time. The mall security patrol arrives at 7 o'clock, and we need to be gone by then." I nodded, pocketing my keys and exiting the car. My legs felt like lead as I followed Sophia back toward the service entrance, each step an effort of will. The morning air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and distant rain. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked as we walked. "Personally? 32 years. The DeMarco family has been maintaining crossing points for centuries." She gave me a sidelong glance. "Your grandmother was supposed to be part of it too, but she chose a different path." She never mentioned any of this. That was her choice. Eleanor believed she could escape her heritage by simply ignoring it. Sophia's tone made it clear what she thought of that decision. When she married into the Sullivan family and changed her name, she cut all ties with us. But the blood remains. The responsibility remains. We reached the service entrance, which now stood propped open with a small black wedge. The smell that wafted out was different from the night before. Less mildew and decay, more like ozone and burnt sage. "My team is already cleansing the areas where the breaches occurred," Sophia explained, leading me into the service corridor. "The seal you reinforced will hold for some time, but we need to erase all traces of what happened here. The remains." I swallowed hard, thinking of Dom's face embedded in that monstrosity I'd seen, of Taylor's body being used like a puppet. "What exactly are these things?" Jessica called them the Old Ones. Sophia's pace never faltered as we made our way through the darkened corridor, her flashlight beam steady and sure. "They have many names. The Hunger, the Watchers, the Void Between. They exist in the spaces between realities, feeding on emotion and life force. Most crossing points are natural formations, caves, certain river junctions, places where the Earth's magnetic field creates vulnerabilities in the barrier between worlds." "But this is a mall," I pointed out, "built directly on top of a major crossing point. My father tried to stop the development, but by the 1980s, the DeMarco influence in Cartersville had waned. The best he could do was design elements into the mall that would contain what lay beneath." Her flashlight illuminated the door to Bennington's books ahead. The fountain was his masterpiece, a seal disguised as public art, powered by the constant flow of human emotion that filled the mall during its operation. We entered Bennington's, now brightly lit by portable work lights, set up by Sophia's team. 2 men in tactical gear were carefully removing books from the shelves, not the dusty, abandoned volumes I'd seen the night before, but newer editions that seemed out of place in the abandoned store. The entities attempted to create lures, Sophia explained, seeing my confusion. Physical manifestations of knowledge or personal items designed to draw victims deeper into the mall. We are removing all of them. We continued through the store and out into the central court, where the transformation was even more dramatic. The DeMarco's Italian fountain gleamed in the work lights, its bronze surfaces polished to a high shine, the basin filled with clear water that glowed faintly blue. Around it, a team of 3 people worked methodically, placing small silver objects at regular intervals around the perimeter. "Anchors," Sophia said, noticing my interest. "They strengthen the seal between maintainers." My attention was drawn to 2 body bags laid out near the East Wing entrance. One was already zipped closed, but the other remained open, revealing a glimpse of blonde hair and a green jacket I recognized immediately. Taylor. I moved toward the bodies, but Sophia caught my arm. "Don't. There's nothing of them left, not really. Just shells the Hunger used and discarded. Their families deserve to know what happened." "And what would you tell them? That their loved ones were consumed by ancient entities dwelling beneath a shopping mall?" Sophia's grip tightened. We'll make it look like an accident. A structural collapse in an abandoned building they were exploring. It's cleaner that way. I pulled away from her, anger flaring. Cleaner for who? For you and your secret family business? These were people, not just problems to be cleaned up. They were victims of something beyond human understanding. Sophia replied, her voice level but intense. Something that would have claimed many more victims if you hadn't reinforced the seal. Focus on the lives you saved, not the ones that were already lost. I wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was catching up to me, making my thoughts fuzzy and disjointed. Sophia seemed to notice, her expression softening slightly. Come, there's someone you should meet. She led me away from the bodies, toward the fountain where an elderly man in a tailored suit stood watching the team place the silver anchors. Despite his age, easily in his 80s, he stood straight-backed and alert, his eyes sharp as they followed every movement. "Uncle?" Sophia called as we approached. "He's here." The old man turned, fixing me with a penetrating gaze that seemed to look straight through me. His face was deeply lined, his hair snow-white, but I immediately recognized the family resemblance, the same high cheekbones and strong jaw I saw in old photos of my grandmother. "Ethan Sullivan," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "Eleanor's grandson. You have her eyes." "This is Miguel DeMarco," Sophia introduced, "Antonio's younger brother and our family's current elder." I extended my hand, which Miguel grasped firmly. His palm was marked with a thin scar, identical to the one now forming on mine. A ritual cut. "You performed the sealing ritual," he said, more statement than question. "Without training, without preparation. That's unusual." "Jessica guided me," I explained. "She told me what to do." Miguel exchanged a look with Sophia. "The Rourke girl? Interesting. Most spirits can't maintain coherence near a crossing point. The entities absorb them, use them as lures." "She was different," I insisted. "It was really her." "Perhaps." Miguel didn't sound convinced. "Or perhaps you saw what you needed to see to complete the ritual." Anger flared again. It was her. She knew things only Jessica would know. "Uncle?" Sophia interjected. "The seal is holding strong, stronger than it has in years. Whatever guided him, it worked." Miguel studied me for another long moment, then nodded. "Indeed. And now we must discuss your role going forward. The ritual you performed has consequences, responsibilities." "What kind of responsibilities?" "You've bound yourself to this crossing point," Miguel explained. "Your blood, your energy is now part of the seal. You'll need to return periodically to reinforce it, especially during times of increased vulnerability. Solstices, equinoxes, certain astronomical alignments. I thought of my life in Atlanta, my job, the normal existence I'd been barely maintaining since Jessica's death. And if I refuse?" Miguel's expression remained impassive. "Then the seal weakens. The hunger grows. Eventually it breaks free entirely." He gestured to the body bags. "Taylor Nichols and Dominic Reeves are just the beginning of what would follow." The weight of his words settled over me like a physical burden. This wasn't some nightmare I could wake up from, some bizarre experience I could file away and forget. This was real, and it was now part of me. "There's more," Sophia added. "The connection works both ways. You'll begin to sense other crossing points, feel disturbances in places where the barrier is thin. Dreams, intuitions, moments of clarity about things you shouldn't know." "It's already started, hasn't it?" Miguel asked, watching me closely. "The awareness, the sensitivity." I thought of how I'd known, somehow, that the phone call was genuinely from Jessica, how I'd understood the true purpose of the fountain despite having no prior knowledge. Maybe. Miguel nodded, satisfied. Then it's settled. You'll join our maintenance team. Learn what you need to know to manage your new sensitivity. Don't I have a choice? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We all have choices, Miguel replied, but some choices have consequences that extend far beyond ourselves. He turned back to the fountain, his posture dismissing me as clearly as if he'd walked away. Sophia will give you the details. We reconvene here for the solstice in June. Sophia led me away from the fountain, back toward the entrance. It's not as bad as it sounds, she said, her tone almost sympathetic. The major maintenances are only quarterly, and you'll have support, training, resources, others who understand what you're experiencing. And the rest of the time, you live your life. Go to work, date, watch bad TV. Just be aware that you're now connected to something larger than yourself. She handed me a business card with only a phone number printed on it. Call this if you begin experiencing severe symptoms, migraines, hallucinations, lost time. Otherwise, we'll contact you before the next maintenance. We had reached the service entrance again. The sky outside had brightened to a clear morning blue, the day fully begun. It felt surreal to step from the shadow-haunted mall into ordinary daylight, to know that I would soon be driving on regular roads, passing people who had no idea what lurked beneath certain buildings, what moved in the spaces between realities. One more thing, Sophia said as I prepared to leave. About Jessica Rourke. I tensed. What about her? If it truly was her spirit that guided you, that means she's chosen to remain close to this world rather than moving on. Sophia's expression was unreadable. That's unusual and potentially dangerous for her and for you. Dangerous how? Spirits that linger too long near crossing points can be changed, corrupted. The hunger is always looking for new lures, new ways to draw in victims. She met my eyes directly. If you truly care for her, you should encourage her to move on the next time you see her. For her own sake. The suggestion felt like a physical blow. The thought of urging Jessica away, of deliberately severing the connection that had saved my life, was almost unbearable. But beneath my instinctive rejection, a small voice of reason acknowledged Sophia's point. I'd seen what the mall entities could do, how they could twist and corrupt. I'll think about it, I said finally. Sophia seemed to accept this. The sun is up. You should go home, rest, process what's happened. And what about Dom and Taylor? Their families. We'll handle it, she promised. They'll have closure, if not the whole truth. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough for the lives that had been lost. But it was all I was going to get. I nodded once, then stepped out into the morning sunshine, leaving the dark secrets of the Westridge Galleria behind me. For now. I woke with a start, heart pounding, sheets damp with sweat. For a moment I didn't know where I was, expecting to see the glowing waters of the DeMarco's Italian fountain or the blood-slicked walls of the abandoned mall. Instead, sunlight streamed through familiar curtains, illuminating the modest bedroom of my apartment in Atlanta. Home, safety, normalcy. I checked my phone. 3:33 p.m. The coincidence made my stomach clench. I'd slept for nearly 10 hours after returning from Cartersville, collapsing into bed, still fully clothed. Now my body ached, my head throbbed, and my bandaged palm stung where I'd cut it for the ritual. The events of the previous night seemed dreamlike in the afternoon light, too bizarre, too horrific to have actually happened, but the business card on my nightstand with its single phone number proved otherwise, as did the text message from an unknown number that had arrived while I slept. Accident at Westridge Mall. Structural collapse claimed 2 urban explorers, local PD notified, family liaison in progress. Say, Sophia DeMarco, informing me that her team had manufactured the cover story for Dom and Taylor's deaths. I should have felt relief that their families would have closure, but all I felt was a hollow ache. They deserved better than a sanitized lie. I forced myself out of bed, wincing at the various pains that made themselves known. Bruised ribs from when the creature had slammed into me, scraped knees from crawling through the maintenance corridor, muscles strained from hours of tense alertness. The bathroom mirror revealed a haggard stranger, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, a day's worth of stubble, hair matted with sweat and grime. I looked like a man who'd been through hell, which, in a way, I had. As I showered, I tried to process everything I'd learned. My grandmother's connection to the DeMarco family, the crossing points and the entities that dwelled near them, my new responsibilities, as Miguel had so casually termed them, and Jessica, her spirit reaching out to guide me, to save me. If you truly care for her, you should encourage her to move on the next time you see her, for her own sake. Sophia's warning echoed in my mind as I dried off and changed into clean clothes. The thought of deliberately pushing Jessica away felt like losing her all over again. But the memory of that blood shadow wearing her face, using her voice to lure me deeper into the mall's trap, was still fresh and horrifying. I made coffee and checked my laptop. The local news sites in Cartersville had already picked up the story. 2 dead in mall collapse, urban explorers tragedy. The articles were sparse on details, citing only that Dominic Reeves, 28, and Taylor Nichols, 27, had entered the abandoned Westridge Galleria sometime Tuesday night and were killed when a section of ceiling collapsed. A security guard had discovered their bodies during a routine patrol Wednesday morning. Clean, clinical, false. My phone rang. Taylor's sister, according to the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail, unable to face her questions, her grief. What could I possibly say? The truth was unbelievable, and the lie felt like a betrayal of both Taylor and Dom's memory. The voicemail notification appeared, followed by a text message. "Ethan, the police said you might have been with Taylor last night. Please call me. I need to know what happened to my sister." I set the phone down, guilt churning in my stomach. Later. I would call her later, when I had my story straight, when I could lie convincingly about why I hadn't been caught in the same accident that claimed Taylor's life. As I sipped my coffee, a strange sensation crept over me, a prickling awareness, as if someone were watching me from just outside my peripheral vision. I turned, scanning the empty apartment, but there was nothing there. Just the ordinary furnishings of my ordinary life, now infiltrated by extraordinary knowledge. I tried to distract myself with work emails, with mindless television, with anything that might restore a sense of normalcy. But my attention kept drifting, my thoughts circling back to the events at the mall. The cut on my palm throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a constant reminder of the blood I'd shed to reinforce the seal. Around sunset, the strange sensations intensified. The air in my apartment felt charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Shadows seemed to move independently of their sources, and voices whispered at the edge of hearing, too faint to make out words, but persistently there. You'll begin to sense other crossing points, feel disturbances in places where the barrier is thin. Dreams, intuitions, moments of clarity about things you shouldn't know. Sophia's words came back to me as I paced restlessly through my apartment. Was this what she meant? This hyper-awareness, this heightened sensitivity to... what? The unseen? The unknown? I found myself drawn to my building's stairwell, descending to the basement level where the laundry facilities and storage units were located. I'd been down here hundreds of times before, never noticing anything unusual. But now, as I approached the far corner where the building's ancient boiler rumbled, I felt it. A subtle wrongness in the air, a sense of depth where there should be only concrete and pipes. The wall seemed to ripple slightly as I stared at it, like heat distortion on asphalt in summer. I reached out, my fingertips hovering inches from the surface, and felt a distinct coolness emanating from what appeared to be solid brick. A crossing point, a small one, barely a pinprick in the barrier between worlds, but unmistakably there. Had it always been here, in my own building? Or was I simply able to perceive it now, after what had happened at the mall? You see it now, don't you? I whirled around to find an elderly woman watching me from the stairwell door. Mrs. Abernathy from apartment 5C, a widow who had lived in the building for decades. I'd always thought of her as just another neighbor, exchanging polite nods in the hallway or brief conversations by the mailboxes. Now I noticed details I'd somehow missed before. The silver pendant around her neck, almost identical to the anchors Sophia's team had placed around the fountain. The faint scar across her palm, matching the fresh one on mine. "You're one of them," I said, the realization dawning. "A DeMarco." Mrs. Abernathy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Marissa DeMarco Abernathy. I've been watching you since you moved in, Ethan, waiting to see if Eleanor's blood would manifest in you." She nodded toward the wall I'd been examining. "It seems it has. You've been spying on me? For 3 years?" "Monitoring," she corrected. "The DeMarcos have monitors placed near most crossing points, even minor ones like this." She gestured dismissively at the wall. "It's barely a tear, really. Nothing like Westridge." I backed away from her, anger and violation surging through me. "So, what? My apartment choice wasn't random? You people have been manipulating my life all along. Don't be dramatic. The apartment was genuinely available when you were looking. We simply ensured your application was approved." Mrs. Abernathy stepped closer to the wall, running her gnarled fingers over the bricks with a practiced motion. "Sophia called this morning, told me what happened at the mall, said you performed the ritual without training, guided by a spirit." The way she said spirit carried unmistakable skepticism. "It was Jessica," I insisted. "She saved my life." "Perhaps." Mrs. Abernathy's tone matched Miguel's from earlier, doubtful, condescending. "Or perhaps it was something else, wearing a familiar face to gain your trust. The entities are clever, patient. They play long games." "It wasn't like that," I argued, though a seed of doubt had been planted. The blood shadow had worn Jessica's face convincingly at first. What if the woman at the fountain had been another trick, another lure? No, there had been differences, subtle but important. The blood shadow had mimicked Jessica's appearance but lacked her essence, her spirit. The presence at the fountain had been truly her, I was certain of it. Wasn't I? Mrs. Abernathy seemed to read my uncertainty. "The first rule of crossing points, Ethan. Trust nothing you see there, especially if it's something you desperately want to see." She turned away, heading back toward the stairs. "Sophia will begin your training after the funeral." "Funeral?" "For your friends. Friday at Pleasant View Cemetery, 2 p.m. She paused at the door. "You should attend, say your goodbyes, then let the dead rest." I watched her disappear up the stairwell, leaving me alone with the subtle wrongness in the basement wall and the growing doubt in my mind. Had I been manipulated from the start? Was my entire life just a series of carefully orchestrated events leading me to that moment in the mall? And Jessica, Had that truly been her spirit guiding me? Or something else? Something that knew exactly what I needed to see and hear to complete the ritual. I returned to my apartment, more unsettled than before. Night had fallen completely, transforming my windows into black mirrors that reflected the interior lights. As I moved to close the blinds, I caught a glimpse of movement in the reflection, a female figure standing behind me where no one should be. I spun around, heart racing, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the window, the reflection showed only me, pale and wide-eyed with fear. Reflective surfaces show what's really there, the false rules had claimed. But what if there had been truth hidden within the lies? What if mirrors and windows and still water really did reveal things our ordinary vision couldn't perceive? My phone rang, startling me from these unsettling thoughts. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. Ethan Sullivan. A man's voice, unfamiliar. This is Detective Warren, Cartersville, PD. I'm investigating the deaths at Westridge Mall. My mouth went dry. What about them? We found your number in Dominic Reeves's call log. Multiple calls Tuesday night. His roommate says he went to the mall looking for you. The detective's tone was professional but pointed. Care to tell me why you weren't mentioned in any of the reports? The carefully constructed story began to unravel before it had even fully formed. The DeMarcos had covered up the supernatural elements of Dom and Taylor's deaths, but they hadn't accounted for the digital breadcrumbs connecting me to the scene. I was supposed to meet them there, but I got held up. The lie felt awkward, transparent. By the time I arrived, there were already police cars. I panicked and left. Detective Warren clearly didn't believe me. And why were you meeting in an abandoned mall after hours in the first place? Urban exploration. It was Taylor's idea. At least that part was true. Mr. Sullivan, I've got 2 dead bodies, signs of a struggle that don't match a structural collapse, and you fleeing the scene. That doesn't look good for you. A pause, heavy with implication. I think you should come down to the station, clear things up. My mind raced. What would happen if I told him the truth? Best case, he'd think I was insane or on drugs. Worst case, well, there were 2 dead bodies that needed explaining. Mr. Sullivan, are you still there? I glanced at the window again and froze. Jessica stood behind me in the reflection, her expression urgent, warning. She shook her head, mouthing words I couldn't quite make out. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning, I told the detective, not taking my eyes off Jessica's reflection. I promise. See that you are, he replied, before hanging up. As soon as the call ended, I turned around, half expecting to find the room empty again. But Jessica was there, not as solid as she'd appeared in the mall, more translucent, like light passing through stained glass, but undeniably present. You shouldn't have answered that call, she said, her voice distant yet distinct. The DeMarcos can't protect you from everything. Jessica, I breathed, torn between joy at seeing her again and fear of what it might mean. Are you really here? Is it really you? Her smile was sad, tinged with something that might have been regret. For now. But it's getting harder to maintain this form. The boundaries are shifting. Because of what happened at the mall. She nodded, moving closer without seeming to walk. The ritual strengthened the seal, but also strengthened your connection to the crossing points, to the spaces between, to me. Her form flickered slightly, but it's not stable, not safe. I reached for her, but my hand passed through her image, encountering only a pocket of cold air. Sophia said you should move on. That lingering near crossing points could change you. She's not wrong. Jessica's expression grew troubled. I can feel it already. The pull, the hunger. It would be so easy to become like them, to feed on grief and fear and hope. Her eyes met mine, determined despite their ghostly quality. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? To warn you. The detective Warren, he's not what he seems. Don't go to the station alone. She glanced toward the window, as if seeing something beyond it. The DeMarcos aren't the only ones aware of crossing points. There are others with different goals, different methods. My head spun with this new information. Others? Like who? I don't know exactly, but they've been watching the West Ridge crossing point for years, waiting for an opportunity. Jessica's form began to fade, her outline blurring. They'll be coming for you now, because of what you did, because of what you've become. Jessica, wait. I tried again to touch her, to hold her here somehow. Don't go. I just found you again. Her smile was heartbreaking in its tenderness. You never lost me, Ethan. Not really. She was barely visible now, a shimmer in the air like heat distortion. Be careful who you trust. Even the DeMarcos don't know everything. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with her warning and the growing certainty that my life had changed irrevocably. The normal existence I'd been clinging to had been an illusion all along, as transparent as Jessica's ghost. I looked down at my phone, at the detective's number still displayed on the screen, then at the business card Sophia had given me, with its single contact number for emergencies. I dialed Sophia's number, my decision made. This is DeMarco, she answered on the first ring. It's Ethan Sullivan. I think we have a problem. The rain fell in sheets, drumming against black umbrellas as the minister's voice carried over the assembled mourners. We commit the bodies of Dominic Reeves and Taylor Nichols to the earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I stood at the back of the crowd, a respectful distance from the grieving families. Dom's mother wept quietly into a handkerchief. Taylor's father stood rigid, his face a mask of stoic sorrow. They had no idea what had really happened to their children, and they never would. Sophia DeMarco appeared silently beside me, dressed in appropriate funeral black, her silver-streaked hair hidden beneath a modest hat. Detective Warren has been handled, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the twin caskets being lowered into the ground. He won't trouble you further. I didn't ask what handled meant. Some questions were better left unasked in this new world I was navigating. The caskets are empty, aren't they? I kept my voice low, though no one was close enough to overhear. Sophia didn't answer directly. The families have closure. That's what matters. The minister finished his remarks. Family members approached the graves, dropping flowers onto the gleaming casket lids. I watched Taylor's sister place a single white rose, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It's not enough, I said. It never is. Sophia's tone held centuries of similar moments, similar regrets. But it's what we can offer. Protection for the many at the cost of truth for the few. The service concluded, mourners drifting away in pairs and small groups, seeking shelter from the intensifying rain. We remained, watching until the cemetery workers began filling the graves with soggy earth. Your training begins tomorrow, Sophia said as we finally turned to leave. 6 a.m., Piedmont Park, by the lake. Miguel will meet you there. And if I don't show up? She gave me a look that needed no words. We both knew I would be there. I returned to my apartment to find it transformed, not physically, but in my perception of it. The crossing point in the basement had altered my awareness of the entire building. I could sense the subtle wrongness now, the way certain corners seemed deeper than they should be, how shadows lingered after their sources had moved on. Jessica hadn't appeared again since her warning about Detective Warren, but I felt her presence occasionally. A familiar perfume when no one was there. A whisper just beyond hearing. A warmth in otherwise empty rooms. Not gone, not fully here. Somewhere in between, like me. I packed a small bag with essentials. Clothing, toiletries, Jessica's locket. The DeMarcos had been clear that my initial training would take several days, possibly weeks. I wasn't sure what exactly they would teach me, only that it was necessary if I wanted to understand and control my new sensitivity to crossing points. As I prepared to leave, I noticed something on my kitchen counter that hadn't been there before. A small silver object, identical to the anchors Sophia's team had placed around the fountain at Westridge. Beside it lay a note in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. "Keep this with you always. It will help you find your way back." The note was unsigned, but I recognized Jessica's handwriting immediately. I picked up the anchor, surprised by its weight and the faint vibration it emitted against my palm. It felt alive somehow, resonating with something inside me. I slipped it into my pocket alongside her locket, these two talismans connecting me to different worlds, different realities. The person I had been 8 months ago, grieving, lost, desperate for one more moment with Jessica, seemed as distant now as another lifetime. In his place stood someone new, someone with one foot in the ordinary world and one in the shadows behind it. Someone with responsibilities I was only beginning to understand, to a family I'd never known I had, to forces older than human memory. Someone who had entered an abandoned mall seeking the dead and instead found a new purpose among the living. As I locked my apartment door behind me, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never be the same again. The rules had changed, the game had changed, and so had I.